The Dream Trees by username SkittishReflections. There is a trigger warning for abuse here, so if you feel like you can't handle it, I do not blame you if you click off. But for those of you who can, let's begin, shall we? And hopefully you enjoy the video. Things didn't change much after Ma died. Pa and my older brothers, Bill, Lou and Roy, still ran the farm. My older sister Bess already knew how to take Ma's place, and I've still got to play with my twin sister Josie and my little sister Sally. Josie, Sally and I would go to the nearby woods and stay by the creek all day. When Bess called us for supper, we'd run home, lick our plates clean and run off to play again until bedtime. After getting us to wash up and wear our pyjamas, Bess would tuck us in and tell us stories about the dream trees. They had skin of bark and hair of leaves, with birds in their eyes and squirrel in their ears. When they slept, they looked just like trees, but when they walked, they moved with ease. If you summoned them just the right way, your dreams come true the very next day. We'd always beg Bess to tell us how to summon a dream tree, and she'd always smile and say she didn't know, but she was sure we'd figure it out. So, every day, Josie, Sally and I would run up to all the trees at the creek, wearing wreaths of twigs and holding hands in a circle as we danced and chanted something different each time. But we tried for 2 years, and none of our dreams came true the next morning. I never got a rifle like Roy's, Josie's head never turned fiery red like Bess's, and Sally never got a singing flower. Things changed a lot when Bess died. Pa and my older brothers Bill, Lou and Roy still ran the farm, but now Josie had to take Bess's place, not only for cooking and cleaning, but for everything. And not only for Pa, but for Bill, Lou and Roy too. They said it was a woman's duty, and they said I was old enough to understand. They also said I was old enough to move out of the girls' room and start helping around the farm. I was also old enough to remember Bess, and I missed her loads. I missed Josie a lot too, and Sally. I only saw them during supper time now. Josie wasn't very good at cleaning and cooking at first, because Bess never taught her. But after Pa punished her a few times, she got better. Josie didn't smile anymore, and I thought it was because she missed me too. So, one evening, I sat on her bed and waited for her to leave Bill and Lou's room. Sally was already sleeping, and she was snoring. I used to find that annoying when I used to sleep next to them, but now I kind of missed it because Roy's snores were louder. Josie walked through the door, and her eyes went wide when she saw me. She quickly wiped her tears and put her finger to her mouth, nodding at Sally before she signalled for me to follow. I walked behind her as she entered Roy's and my room, and Roy smirked before he left and closed the door behind him. Josie turned to me, her eyes to the floor, but she didn't say anything. I'd never seen her like this, and I got scared that she might be feeling sick. "Joe, you ain't sick, are you?" I asked. "Should I call Pa?" She looked up at me with wide eyes and quickly shook her head. "You don't look so good. Are you tired? You want to sit down?" She seemed relieved as she nodded. She didn't want to sit on my bed, so we sat on the floor, and I gave her my blanket because she was hugging herself. She wrapped it round her shoulders and looked out the window as if she'd lost something she'd never get back. You okay?" I asked. "You remember Bess's stories about those dream trees?" I sat up excited. "Of course I do! Did you figure out how to summon them?" She looked down, and after a few seconds she said in a soft voice, "I don't like doing my duty for Pa, Bill, Lou or Roy. But you have to. It's a woman's duty, and you're a woman. I know. It hurts. Did you tell them? I did. They said I had to do it, or else Sally had to do it. They said I had to teach her to cook and clean too, in case I die like Bess and Ma. You ain't going to die. She sighed and turned to the window again, staring in silence for a few seconds before she said, I think Bess made up those stories about the dream trees. No, she didn't. She did. She made them up because she was hurting too, but she couldn't do nothing about it, so she had to protect me and Sally. I think the stories made her happy because she could imagine her dreams coming true, but it ain't real. It is so, and I'm going to summon one to prove it. She turned to me with hollow eyes. If you find one, dream for it to make me a boy, so I don't ever hurt no more. I scoffed. Boys get hurt too. I pulled up my pyjama leg to show a fresh scar. See, got that from the chicken coop. Bleeded so much I thought I was going to die. I swiveled on the floor and took off my shirt to show her my back. Got those from Pa for breaking some eggs today. Had to change shirts 3 times because they kept bleeding through them. I turned towards her again, and she stared at me for a few seconds before she handed me my blanket and left the room. Roy walked in a minute later, and I winced as he slapped me on the back and congratulated me on becoming a man. I told him Josie said she was getting hurt doing her duty for them, and he said to ignore her because women like to exaggerate and complain. I asked if Josie was going to die, and he said not if she follows the rules. What Roy said made sense. Rules were important on the farm. We all followed them because it was very easy to have accidents, and both Josie and I had new duties after Bess died. But I didn't complain because I was a boy. Maybe when Sally starts helping Josie, they complain less because they could split their duties. But I didn't like how much Josie had changed after she took Bess's place, and I especially didn't like how she stopped believing in Bess's stories about the dream trees. I made a vow to do whatever it took to summon a dream tree and show her she was wrong. Maybe, just maybe, it would make her happier to know that the stories were true. The next day, I went down to the creek after I finished all my chores, and I did everything I could think of around every tree I could find. I sang, I chanted, I danced, I begged and I cried. I made totems and arranged rocks. I splashed water and threw dirt. I swung from branches and hopped around roots. I even stripped naked and coated myself with mud, but nothing worked. I sat down, dejected, and tried to figure out what else I could do. We'd never tried summoning a dream tree at night, or done it in a place that meant something to us. We'd also never tried all having the same dream. Maybe it was like when that rafter fell on Bill. We all had to work together to lift it off him, because one of us alone wasn't strong enough. I went home for supper, and I could barely stay in my seat as I looked at Josie. She was busy helping Sally eat, but she kept shooting me glances every now and then, wondering why I was staring at her like that. I wanted to tell her, but I couldn't just yet. I had to wait until she finished cleaning up, putting Sally to bed, and going to Pa's room. I lied in my bed, antsy, as I listened to Roy snore and waited for Josie to return to her room. It was past midnight when I heard her footsteps in the hall, and I jumped up and ran after her. I grabbed her arm and she recoiled and stifled a scream as she turned to me. "Joe, guess what?" I whispered as I let go of her. "I figured out how to summon a dream tree." "You idiot, you scared me," she growled, her voice shaking. "Leave me alone, I'm tired." I followed as she walked into her room. "I think summoning works if we do it at night all together at Bess's and Ma's graves, and we all have the same dream. and we should wake Sally up for more summoning power. We got to chant and dance the exact same way too. She rolled her eyes and made her way to the bed. It ain't real. Go back to sleep. I grabbed her arm again. Come on, Joe, you just got to... Don't touch me, Jasper, she hissed, wrenching herself out of my grip. She only said my full name when she was really angry. But I didn't know what I did to upset her. Jeez, Joe, why you gotta stick up your ass? I just wanted to try summoning a dream tree. You can even choose the dream. I'll dream it and we'll tell Sally to dream it as well, and that should make it more powerful. What do you say? She stared at me, and I smiled when her shoulders relaxed. She sighed and woke Sally up, and we all sneaked out the house and walked to the edge of the woods where Bess and Ma's graves were. We picked the tree right in front of them, and stood in a circle beneath it, holding hands. The only light came from the moon, and the only sounds were the leaves rustling above our heads, and the ones crunching under Sally's fidgeting feet. So, what's going to be the dream? I asked Josie. She looked up at the swaying branches, her long hair waving in the breeze. Would you ever make me do my duty the way Pa, Bill, Lou and Roy do? I don't know, maybe when I'm older. She let go of my hand. So, you still ain't old enough to do it, but I am. I frowned in offence. I'm old enough. I can make you do your duty, I just don't feel like it. I can make you do your duty right now to prove it. She turned to me with an expression so haunted it made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Would you make Sally do it if I die? She asked. Stop saying you're going to die. Bess and Ma died. That's because they were sick. Maybe I'll get sick too. Don't say that. Why do you care? 'Cause I won't be there to cook and clean? 'Cause you're my twin. Except I don't hardly recognise you no more. You keep complaining about your duties and talking about dying. Why do women got to be like that? I got duties too, and I don't complain. Yours ain't like mine. So, ain't my fault you were born a woman. It's not mine either. Then go ahead and dream to be a boy if that's what you want, ain't it? Then you can work outside under the sun and get all dirty and achy and sweaty and bit by bugs and get splinters and blisters and cuts that bleed forever. She didn't reply as she looked up at the swaying branches again. Sally let go of my hand and shuffled over to her big sister with a sleepy whine, and Josie hugged her tightly, taking a deep breath before releasing it slowly. I don't want to be a boy no more, she said. I want this. Right now. I want to breathe fresh air and curl my toes in the dirt and see the stars and feel my hair playing in the wind. I want Sally and me to be free without nobody hurting us or telling us what to do. Then we'll... Shh, Jazz. Please, don't talk. Let me enjoy my dream. She sat down and laid back between Ma's and Bess's graves, hugging Sally, and I scowled at her in frustration. I stayed up excited because I had it all figured out, and I came out here to finally summon a dream tree. And it turned out she still didn't believe. I turned away in a huff and stomped back to the house, but when I got to the front door, I stopped. I couldn't leave them outside alone. They could get hurt and it'd be all my fault. I walked back to them, and Josie's eyes followed me as I lied down on my side, facing her. She sighed as her gaze went back to the stars, and I sighed and turned to the sky as well. I awoke the next morning to a lot of noise, and I sprung up and looked around in shock and confusion. Josie and Sally weren't next to me, but there were a lot of men around. Some I recognised and some I didn't. They were calling to each other and yelling, and Sheriff Watley carried me away and told me everything was going to be alright. Sheriff Watley and his wife adopted me that evening, because my entire family was gone. Pa, Bill, Lou and Roy were all found dead, pinned to their beds by long branches stabbed straight through their chests. their eyes and tongue pecked out, and their fingers and private parts gnawed off. As for Josie and Sally, they were never found. The police said the murders were probably the result of an ugly business rivalry, and that the birds and animals from a nearby woods fed on the corpses. They also said that Josie, Sally and I probably ran away in fear and got lost in the woods, but I was the only one who found my way back and sought comfort at my mother's and sister's graves. I didn't correct them, because I was certain I was the one responsible. I'd figured out how to summon a dream tree, and it was all a misunderstanding, because it misunderstood Josie's dream. At first I cried, my guilt suffocating me. After my tears came anger, as I cursed Josie for a confusing, selfish dream that left me an orphan. After anger came hatred, then self-pity, and then indifference, as I tried to cope with the sudden upheaval of my life. It was a difficult road, but Sheriff Whatley and his wife were saints, as they understood my situation, put up with my moods and corrected my flawed backwards logic. As I grew older, I spent many nights crying as I looked back, finally understanding how flawed my family was. When I came of age, Pa's farm became mine, and I set foot on that land for the first time since I lost my family. The moment I parked my truck, I walked over to Bess's and Ma's grave to pay my respect. As I got closer, I tilted my head at the willowy tree swaying above their graves. Its fiery red leaves a stark contrast against the green surrounding it. Beside it was a vibrant pink bush that, when the wind hit it just right, it seemed to sing as each petal fluttered. I stared, my breath stolen as their carefree branches waved in the playful breeze, and I slowly lowered myself to the ground, bittersweet tears lining my eyes as I rejoined my family once more.